Welcome to the Political Insider, where we will once again have a look at what happened in the parliamentary committee meeting investigating the allegations of General Mkhwanazi into police capture, the disbandment of the political killings task team, and corruption on an industrial scale in this country of ours. Before we get into it, I want to remind you, please subscribe to the Political Insider. It's great to see the channel growing. It helps us to put out more content and for YouTube to put us higher up so more people can get to see what we have to say. Right, so let's get into it. What happened in Parliament yesterday? Well, the important thing was that we heard from the Police Commissioner himself, Fannie Masemola. Now, he's the guy who's meant to head up the whole of the police service, whereas Mkhwanazi was in charge of KZN. Here you've got the top dog, the top police guy, and he seems to be a little bit more political, whereas Mkhwanazi has been quite edgy. Mkhwanazi is the kind of enforcer, whereas Masemola is a bit of a diplomat. However, there is a lot of symmetry between what Masemola has to say, with regards to what Mkhwanazi has alleged. And he said something quite interesting, and he said that there are forces within South Africa that are constantly concocting plans, these were his words, to remove police commissioners. So basically, we haven't had a police commissioner complete a 5-year term yet. That instability is done on purpose. You put a guy in there, you say, follow this, or else we'll replace you. You line up a replacement or two. Those people are then beholden to either a politician. He said that these plots involved criminal cartels, people inside the police service, as well as the judiciary. This is what he had to say, the correctional service and even magistrates. Basically, what he's saying is that there's a whole lot of pressure to keep the police commissioner constantly in danger of losing his position, and maybe then his replacement is beholden to the people that have got rid of the incumbent, so that the next police commissioner is just a little bit more user-friendly than the last one. And you do that way to hollow out the police service. Obviously, the question then comes in whether Masemola had been that guy when he got the job. But anyway, that's a separate thing. He did say, and I suppose he would say that, wouldn't he, that the police is not in a state of crisis. They will fix it up. It's just this sort of bad element that they need to get out of there. So that was what he had to say in Parliament. It wasn't one of those days full of bombshells. That was largely what Mkhwanazi said when he reported to Parliament. But the bombshells happened outside of Parliament for once. And what were those bombshells? Those bombshells were 2 very high-profile raids and 1 claimed raid. That sounds crazy. Let's deal with a claimed raid first. And that is Senzo Mkhunu, our police chief, who's currently on the beach because the president hasn't suspended him, fired him, or kept him in his job. Instead, he sent him at home on sort of permanent leave, a position we'd all love. This guy, Shadrack Sibiya, was Senzo Mkhunu's chief of staff. He's fixer, if you will. He seems to be a busybody. He gets his nose into everything. But basically, he was kind of the go-between the Minister of Police and the police service. And he claims that there was a raid on his flat, that it's not even sure whether it's his flat or his brother's flat. When they arrived there, they didn't find him there. They found his brother there. According to Nkabinda, they were assaulting his brother, looking for devices. But nobody else seems to know about this raid other than Shadrack and Nkabinda. There's no pictures. There was no media. It seems like this guy is just trying to shout victim before he's a victim. He's coming out of this as looking like one of those people who's very, very suspect in the whole story, and a bit of a police version of Brown Machotsi. We're going to have to keep an eye on Cedric and Kabinda. When you've got a guy as weak as this, there's a good chance that he's the guy who ends up saying the wrong things for those bad people that need him to say the right things. Let's discount that raid because it's not apparent that the thing actually happened. But two very high-profile raids with a lot of evidence, a lot of coverage. And, as it works around in government, they sort of tip off a couple of journalists to a couple of media groups to say, well, not saying for sure, but go to such and such and address something may be happening. And there were two raids that were quite high profile. One was in Centurion for Shadrack Sibiya. Shadrack Sibiya is head of the Hawks in Gauteng, and by all accounts, a dirty cop. That's really the allegation against him. And he claims that butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, but he was the guy who took those political killings task team files, the dockets, we know about 121 dockets, and basically removed them. And, he was really the guy that stopped all of on the ground, that stopped the investigations into all of these criminal syndicates. He seems to be a guy with a lot of questions to answer. By all accounts, he is a guy who is for sale, and these are the allegations. So his place was raided. Once again in South Africa, we either do nothing or we do it sort of Hollywood style. There were helicopters circling his house. Stuff was taken. The devices were taken. Suddenly the police have realized that you should actually look at people's phones and laptops and not look for paper, because you may not find a lot of that. But Shadrack Sibiya was there being raided and being represented by Ian Levitt, quite a high-profile lawyer. And one is always amazed as to where the funding comes from to pay for these lawyers. This does not come cheap. Where do these people get the money from to have these high-profile, very busy lawyers on tap? Now, if you know any of these guys, I've never seen one that worries about the budget at the end of the month. But where does someone like Shadrack Sibiya get the money from to get these high-profile lawyers? That's just an aside. Anyway, he was there. And that raid, obviously there's evidence that'll come out of this. We'll have to see where it comes from. But there's no doubt that Sibiya will appear at both the Madlanga Commission as well as the ad hoc meeting in Parliament, where I'm sure he will claim that Mkhwanazi is the bad guy, that he was just trying to uphold the law. It's going to be he said, she said, and at this stage we've only heard from one side of the argument. The other raid was possibly the raid that we would find more interesting, you and I, and that was Hangwani Maumela. Hangwani Morgan Maumela. This is a guy who's definitely one of the syndicate kings. Sketch the picture. He is a nephew of our president by a first marriage. The president then claims not to know him, even though he is an extremely wealthy, high-profile benefactor of the ruling party. But, Cyril didn't know that there was corruption. He was deputy president, and he didn't know there was corruption in the office next door. So there's every chance that our oblivious president would know nothing about Maumela. The president, incidentally, got the hell out of Dodge, and he's currently in Ireland. I think he's running out of countries to run away from South Africa to go and visit. I presume we'll find him in Greenland one of these days, or maybe in outer Mongolia, but he's going to be anywhere but in South Africa. This raid on Maumela's house in Sandhurst was one of those that, was really made for television. Well, for starters, Maumela's house is made for television. I made the point recently that, remember back in the day, we used to have Police File on TV where they used to talk about criminals wanted for this and wanted for that. That has been replaced by Top Billing. Top Billing will always show you the houses of these criminal masterminds worth millions. We saw that in the Gupta, in the Zondo Commission, where many of the houses of people there that were fingered for corruption had been on Top Billing. Maumela's house would break Top Billing. It's a 3-story mansion. It's got artworks worth millions, and you're not going to make that by opening a restaurant down on the corner. What was interesting, of course, and of course quite salacious, was to see them loading up 4 royal blue Lamborghinis. Now, those things don't come cheap. I'm always confused as to why you'd buy a Lamborghini in Johannesburg, where you can't drive 100 meters without finding a pothole. These things sit about 1.5 inches off the ground. You can't go over the speed bumps, the potholes. I don't know. Anyway, he's got 4 of them, and they were taken away, as well as artworks. Stuff was listed that's going to be taken away. There were removal vans. It looked like he was getting taken properly. And remember, he is one of the masterminds. He's one of the key leeches, the people that took all of the money out of the Tembisa hospital. He is the person whose crime syndicate would be responsible for the deaths of thousands of people that can't get health care when they go to a hospital like Tembisa Hospital. We've got to understand that this is a syndicate that's been running for over a decade. He's clearly involved. His name's come up, and he was there and raided, and it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting thing to see what happens next with Maumela. Until now, he's been the mystery man. There's only one photo, side profile photo of his. We don't really know what he looks like. Even his uncle doesn't claim to know him. So it's a fantastic story. We'll see where that one goes to. But it shows that the police, 4 years after Babita Deokaran got gunned down, are finally doing their work. In that time, people like Jeff Wicks have had enough time to write books about it. But suddenly the police, this lands on their desks suddenly at the same time these commissions start. So this is definitely not a coincidence, but police are doing their work. We need to focus on one thing, because it's something that Mkhwanazi said late in his testimony, and that was talking about what happens in Gauteng. We'll remember about 2 years ago, in the build-up to the last election, the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, put together his own militia. These were kind of quasi-soldiers, policemen dressed in PEP T-shirts, costing millions and millions, that were nicknamed the AmaPanyaza. These are so-called police helpers. Well, Mkhwanazi said that this was not legal. And, there seems to be a loophole. The Gauteng government says it is. Suddenly, the Gauteng government is referring to them as traffic wardens. Well, I don't know about you. I live in Johannesburg. We barely have a working traffic light. I've seen the ones that aren't working, and I'm yet to see one of those traffic wardens at that light. It was a vote-catching ploy which didn't work, because the ANC share of the vote dropped by more than 17% here in Gauteng. But there's a question around the legality of it all. But, it raises a bigger question in the province of Gauteng, where the provincial government is not responsible for a lot of stuff. And their biggest budget item is that Gauteng, or every province, manages the healthcare and schools in their province. Schools, all you can really steal is the feeding scheme and maybe the textbook money. But healthcare, you can steal a lot. And Gauteng has been ground zero for theft when it comes to Gauteng health. When is somebody from Gauteng going to be called to one of these commissions? We saw the Gauteng government kill 144 mentally challenged people in the Life Esidimeni scandal, and nobody paid a price other than the 144 people that got killed and their families. And the state seems to be fine with it. We saw fires in buildings that killed people. We saw roads exploding. Nobody has been held to account. It's got to be that if these commissions are doing their work, that politicians that were willfully negligent or corrupt, that has resulted in the deaths of people, are held responsible. One of the names that's always central to this is Panyaza Lesufi. I think he's got an office across the road from Pretoria Girls High because he's there every 5 minutes trying to find evidence of racism. But I can't see how these commissions will continue to avoid the rot that is Gauteng. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I hope you've enjoyed the summary. There's going to be a lot more to come. Thanks for joining us on the Political Insider. I'm sure you've subscribed by now. Let's keep it going. Thank you so much for joining me today.